guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books. Today you are getting a review from us from a very popular book, something outside of Gretchen's comfort zone, but very much within my own, and that is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, specifically Volume 1 of Heartstopper, so don't worry, there's going to be no spoils or anything. We're just going to be talking about Volume 1. If you didn't know, Heartstopper is a YA graphic novel that was originally a web series on Web Novel that follows Nick and Charlie, two boys who may or may not fall in love. Spoilers, it's a love story. So yeah, they fall in love. The main point in this one is that Charlie is out. Everybody at his school knows that he is gay. He has been hooking up with a guy named Ben for a while, but Ben is not out. And that's starting to bother him. He meets in one of his classes Nick, another boy who's a year older than him, and they start hanging out and grow a little bit closer, but Nick is also, as far as Charlie knows, straight, and that could be problematic.
So as Michaela mentioned, and I think that if you've seen some of our other videos or we've talked about graphic novels before, graphic novels are also not my thing. I'm fairly certain Michaela is the reason I also read like the first one I read for fun. I think the first one I actually read was Watchmen, but that was for class, and whoop boy was that of interest. This is not Watchmen, I can confirm. So if we're looking at overall impressions, first of all, it's always really interesting to me to see just how I as a reader will react to a graphic novel. It's not, I don't want to say not comfortable for me, but it's just not something I do on the regular. So I'm always just like, I don't know how this was going to go. I have some thoughts on some specific choices that were made throughout the book, and we'll talk more about those. But the basic thing to say about Heartstopper is that it is adorable. It is cute. It is sweet. It is a thesaurus of words that mean cute. All of them are in here. And it's a very cerebral, I think, for a graphic novel, which again, we'll talk more about later, but a lot of what is happening in here is like Charlie trying to figure out like where he stands in his school and his relationship with Ben and his relationship with Nick. And Nick, since as far as Nick knows, Nick is straight, you know, trying to figure out in his own head the reactions that he's having with his friendship with Charlie. So I think that that all contributes to being a really interesting story in this one volume to portray as a graphic novel, but I enjoyed it. It was sweet, it was cute, it was all of those words. And I'll talk a little bit more about some things that didn't make it a 5-star for me, but it is definitely a 4.
I should note that I was introduced to Alice Oseman, I want to say 2 years ago, when I read Radio Silence for the demisexual representation in that book. You can see a review, or at least a partial review of that, where I talked about a couple other Ace Spectrum books that I had read at the time. But that meant that I already knew about Alice Oseman, and I had actually been picking up Heartstopper as the volumes were coming out. Now, at this point in time, you can't get any volumes of Heartstopper, at least not from Barnes & Noble, because all of the stores are sold out, all of the warehouses are sold out, and we're not set to get any more from the publisher until, I want to say, August is when they're expecting more stock to come in. So clearly it's popular now, right? And everybody's reading it. I think that's thanks to the Netflix adaptation. But I should say that I have read all 4 volumes that are out so far, so I have a little bit more knowledge on this story than Gretchen does, but we're only talking about the first one today. I gave this 4.5 stars when I first read it, but I want to say that I read the first 2 volumes together. And when I had suggested this for us to read, I had actually kind of forgotten how little plot there was just in this first volume. So, I will say that I think that this is better as a bingeable thing. And if you want to, it's bingeable on Web Novel. You can read the whole thing for free online if that's what you want. Because I think it's better taken at that point, which might be why my rating is a little bit higher than hers, but I don't have anything extra to say about this than she did. It's cute, it's sweet, it's a romance, this first novel, that's what it is. That's all there is to it. It's just some cute flirting and interactions and some slight speculations on sexuality stuff, especially for YA, for folks that might be questioning their sexuality at the time. Like, it felt cute. It was good.
So as someone who only read volume 1, and I don't mean that as that's all I'm going to read, I may very well read the rest of these, but as someone who, as of the making of this video, has only read volume 1, I already have an issue with graphic novels, which is often I read them really fast and then I'm like, that was it? Because for me, I read a lot of, like 900-page nonfiction novels, or like 400 to 500-page fantasy novels. And so I often feel with graphic novels that I want more than there is. And I do feel like specifically with this book, I don't want to say it was like a problem because I still really enjoyed it, but it was definitely like when it ended, and I was reading on my phone, so I couldn't like tell necessarily how much of the book was left. So I got to the end and I was like, are you serious? That's it? That's it? And it's a good thing to want more, but at the same time, like I said, this is a very cerebral graphic novel. There's a lot of thinking about their individual personalities and identities, which is not a process that you necessarily want to show happening quickly. I understand that. But yeah, I don't know. Like Michaela said, this is definitely something where if you're gonna start reading 1, make sure you have at least 2 already in your back pocket, because volume 1 is very sweet, it's very cute, but from what I understand from the rest of this series, it gets way more involved after this, and I'm not necessarily sure that volume 1 is a really good indicator of that.
So I will say, and I mentioned it earlier, that this was originally published as a web novel, or as a web graphic novel through Webtoon, which we have both read comics that have been published through Webtoon, and those usually update quite fast. So we're talking like once a week you'll get an update. Like there's a day during the week that they always publish every single week. If you are reading something like this and you get to the end and you know that you're going to get another update next week, you might not care so much about that cliffhanger that is, well, the way that it ended, the timing of where it ended for Gretchen. You may not feel that same amount of distress, right? Because you know that I'm going to get another update next week. I'll know what's going to happen in the rest of the story and keep going. We have 4 volumes out, so definitely if you can get all 4 volumes, you can binge them physically. But when we're talking about something that is being published serially, the pacing thing isn't going to be as much of an issue, I don't think. Now, again, I was reading them as graphic novels, so I also had this experience, but I had the first 2 together, so I was able to feel a little bit more comfortable about that. But keeping in mind that this is technically published serially, the pacing is going to be different than something that would be published altogether.
I have potentially a nitpicky comment, and I don't know, I mean, Michaela and I were talking about this, and we cannot figure it out. So when the graphic novel was published on Webtoon, it was black and white, which is fine. Plenty of these are black and white. This I understand. But when they printed it for the graphic novel, and therefore also, on the graphic novel ebook that you get, there is a secondary color, and it is this mint green color, which for whatever reason drove me up a wall. I can't tell you why. I am not a graphic person. I am not a color person necessarily, but I just couldn't figure out the why. And I was almost just like, I wish this was just black and white. If it's not going to be full color, which is my preferred, I read things like Lore Olympus on Webtoon, and I read things like Sub-Zero and Midnight Poppyland, which are all full color. So I'm not a fan of just like the secondary color, and I don't get why it was mint. Michaela and I have Googled it. We tried to research it. I don't know why they spent the extra money when they printed it on this mint color. This has absolutely no bearing on the actual story. It didn't really necessarily, make my enjoyment less. I just have questions. Why was it mint? If someone could tell me, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't have answers as to why mint. I did tell Gretchen that obviously things like this and this that are published weekly have a very fast thing, and that when we talk about the full color of Lore Olympus, it's not full color in the same way that a lot of other comics and graphic novels are, because it's still a very muted color palette. Like, everybody is one solid color, right? Like, Persephone is pink. Every single part of Persephone is pink. It's not like her clothes get a different color. Hades is always blue. Every single thing on Hades is blue. But it does Gretchen argued that his suit is black, but, like, you know what I'm saying, right? Like, it's a single color. And part of that is because of the speed at which these are being published. But the other thing to think about here is that these are all being every single part of this is being created by one person. The writing, the illustration, and the coloring is done by one person. Whereas if we talk about, like, serial comics, when we talk about what are published traditionally as comics, these have a writer, an illustrator, and then at least one, usually sometimes more, colorist whose job it is just to do the coloring. Sometimes the illustrator is also the colorist, but even still in this case, if we talk about something that is published specifically as a graphic novel, like this entire thing was published as one piece, it's not like chapters or comics, then there's one artist doing all of the work here. This one has writers and an artist, but still, you're talking about, like, the speed at which these come out, the like, simplification of color and design happens for web things that have to come at that speed. And we did talk about how they often take hiatuses to work on a lot of stuff, and then they'll publish weekly again after that time period. But even still, that could be why. The other thing that I had mentioned when we were talking about this was the fact that Alice Oseman is a writer. Like, she went to college for writing, whereas some of the people who do web novels went to college for art. Like, they went to college for design or illustration, and their degrees are in that. So somebody who draws, and draws well, and has created a web novel may not be as comfortable doing something in full color. Again, why they chose mint instead of grayscale, I don't know. Couldn't tell you. It is a little bit weird because there are characters whose skin becomes entirely mint because I'm assuming they're people of color. And in the original novel, that just meant that they had, like, a grayscale skin tone versus a white skin tone, and now they have a mint skin tone. So there's some weirdness there. I understand Gretchen's complaint, but, like, that's one of the things that is there when it comes to that.
So yeah, when we talk about graphic novels, I'm often here to just kind of look pretty, because one of the other incredible things that when we were doing the pre-discussion for this review, Michaela brought up is about the change, right, from a web comic to a printed graphic novel, and then I was talking about reading it on my phone, and Michaela will go into more about this. But there was some stuff that Michaela was bringing up, and I was like, oh, I didn't even notice that because I was reading it on my phone. But because I was reading it on my phone, but not on Webtoon, I was reading the library's ebook copy. It's still, like, page by page, right? If you've ever read on your phone, and I don't have a giant phone, it's about a yay big screen. So you're reading, page by page. And so anything that's supposed to be, for example, connected, or there's nothing, I think, in this one that's like a full panel spread because it was a web comic, but you don't get that when you read on your phone like that. And so it wasn't until we had this discussion and Michaela opened up her book and was telling me about this stuff that I thought about that as a difference as well. Again, Michaela's about to go more into it, but I do think specifically with this, the way that you choose to engage with it, so either on Webtoon, in the graphic novel form, or as an ebook, really will make an impact on how you take the story in, and so you should be aware of that before you pick your method.
For anybody who hasn't read a Webtoon comic or doesn't regularly read web comics in general, because it doesn't need to be through the app Webtoon, most other web comics, whether they have their own website or anything else, also are read this way. They're read vertically. If you didn't know, you're scrolling down a page, you're scrolling down the web novel as you go. So all of the panels are organized vertically. When we read a book physically, they're horizontal in a way that they wouldn't have been normally. And I had flipped to a point, I don't remember exactly where, but, like, I could tell that when this chapter had been posted on web novel, it would have been read vertically, and the way that the panels were set up, that would have created a break. But on this page, there was, like, part of a panel and then some white space and then another panel on the bottom of the page, right? And when you're scrolling in a normal web novel, that would have been just like a break from the momentum, and we're continuing down and we're continuing to read. On a page, it's a little bit awkward. Now, there was nothing in this that was like extremely egregious. There was nothing that like completely threw me off, right? But you will notice when you are reading these that there is sometimes a fair amount of white space, if I could find an example of that on some of these, right? Like there's a fair amount of white space at certain points. And the thing that you need to think about is that this was above this, right? So that like dissension where these boxes got smaller and smaller, and then we have white space here and we have white space here before the next thing, would have been all connected in one piece. So it affects the reading of this, right? Like it was originally meant to be read vertically. I would recommend reading it through Webtoon because of that. It's not that it is egregious here in the graphic novel, but it's something to think about. And the way that that changes the size of certain panels, I'm sure, and also just the way that those breaks line up, it's not the ideal way to be read. When you look at it, again, a serial comic like this, most of the time you're getting these full, every single bit of these pages is covered with something, right? Because it's meant to be read this way. You'll sometimes even get full 2-page spreads or a panel that goes across 2 pages like this, which again, you get because we know this is how this was designed. It was formatted to be published this way, so you have that as the way that it's being read. And there are apps that make reading graphic novels accessible. They often go panel by panel rather than showing you a full page. They may show you a full page spread, but you can't see it on a phone or a tablet the way that you would normally, so you're going to zoom in on a part of it and then move around the page as you're reading. It's definitely something to think about because these are obviously visual materials. Like it's something that's meant to be looked at, and when you change the way it was originally designed, it can sometimes affect the flow of a story. So it's just something to think about, that this was meant to be viewed vertically and we're seeing it horizontally. And even then, when you do what Gretchen did and you read it on your phone, you're seeing page by page. You're not even getting the 2-page spread, so you may not even realize how 2 different pages could have been connected if you don't see them the right way.
Again, all of this is not to say that you either shouldn't read this or that we didn't enjoy reading it. This is all just really interesting stuff that I, as someone who does not read any of these mediums on the regular, unless it's Lore Olympus, because that is the supreme of all things, don't at me. Like, I was really interested to hear Michaela talk about this because I feel like it brought me back to my own reading experience in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. And if, that can help inform which way you choose to read it, go for it, man. If it doesn't, I don't know. Apparently you can't get this from your local Barnes & Noble until like August. So it may be that you want to read it on its web form so that you can actually read it before August. That is also a choice you may have to make if you can't get it. And I was like 30th in line on my library's copy as well for the ebook. So it's really popular right now, and it's really popular for a reason. We have not yet tried out the Netflix TV show. We wanted to keep this just bookish, but that may also be something in our future. We also are hoping to read another one of Alice Oseman's books this year. We're hoping to read her novel Loveless. And as with many things here at Betwixt the Books, we'll see if that happens, because we have a lot of dreams, and sometimes ADHD brain goes sparkle and we go the other direction. So, I give that to you as something we're hoping to do. Hopefully maybe we can even revisit if we've read more of these and talk about Alice Oseman's style in general. We'll see. If you know why they chose mint or have any other comments you would like to make, leave them down below, and otherwise we will see you next time.